The email hit my inbox during a company-wide meeting projected on the conference room screen for all 50 Callahan employees to see. Subject, "You're not one of us." My stepfather, Richard Voss, stood at the podium, his silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights, his voice calm as he read it aloud. "Marlie Hensley is not a Callahan by blood," he announced, his eyes locking onto mine across the crowded Denver office. "I have proof, and I'm filing to remove her from the family trust. She has no claim to our legacy." The room went silent, then buzzed with whispers. Colleagues I'd worked with for years, people I'd shared coffee runs and late-night deadlines with, averted their eyes. My face burned not just from the words, but from the weight of their stares, their pity, their judgment. I gripped my chipped ceramic mug painted with a faded sunflower from a high school art class, its familiar weight the only thing keeping me from bolting. That mug was my one keepsake from childhood, a quiet defiance against Richard's sterile world. Now it felt like the last piece of me he hadn't crushed. I was Marlie Hensley, 29, a grant writer for the Callahan Foundation's nonprofit, arm scraping by in a Denver apartment that smelled faintly of mildew. Until 10 minutes ago, I'd believed Richard was my savior, the man who'd adopted me at 5, rescuing Mom and me from a life of uncertainty after my biological father, a ghost she never named, vanished. Mom Celine had always painted Richard as our rock, the one who gave us the Callahan name. Sure, he'd never loved me like his sons Owen and Levi, but I thought he'd at least seen me as family. Now the entire company knew I was nothing to him. Richard clicked off the projector, his smile sharp. "Marlie, you're welcome to stay for the meeting, but I trust you'll respect the board's decision tomorrow." I stood, my legs shaky, clutching the mug like a lifeline. "You didn't have to do this in front of everyone," I said, my voice low, but carrying. Heads turned, and for a moment, Richard's smile flickered. "It's business, not personal," he said, turning to the next slide like I was already gone. I walked out, the whispers trailing me like smoke. In the elevator, my phone buzzed with texts from coworkers. "Marlie, you okay? Did you know I ignored them?" My eyes burning. The mug's chipped rim dug into my palm, a reminder of the kid who'd painted it for Mom, thinking it'd make her smile. Richard had called it tacky and banished it to a cupboard, but I'd taken it when I moved out at 18, a small act of rebellion. Now it was all I had of the family I thought I knew. Back in my apartment, I reread the email on my laptop, each word a knife. Proof. What proof? My adoption papers were legal. I'd seen them framed in Mom's office like a badge of honor. Was Richard lying, or did he know something about my real father? And why humiliate me publicly the day before the trust's board vote? The Callahan Trust, tied to their real estate empire, was Richard's obsession built by his father to preserve the family name. Mom had hinted last month that I might get a small share, enough to clear my student loans or save the old Westgate Library, a historic building Richard wanted to demolish for another glass tower. Now he was erasing me to keep it all for Owen and Levi, his golden heirs. I called Mom, my hands shaking. She answered, her voice tight. "Marlie, I saw the email. I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" My voice cracked. "He read it to the whole company, Mom. Did you know he was going to do this?" "I didn't," she said, but her pause felt heavy. "Richard's been different lately. I thought he'd let the trust thing go." "Let what go?" I snapped. "You always said he saved us. Was that a lie? Who's my real father?" Silence stretched sharp and painful. "It's not that simple," she said finally. "Your father? He wasn't ready to be a parent. Richard stepped in, and I thought it was best for you." Best? I laughed, bitter and raw. "He just told the world I'm not his daughter, and you're defending him." "I'm not," she said, her voice breaking. "Marlie, please come over. We need to talk." I hung up, too angry to listen. The mug sat on my table, its sunflower faded but stubborn, like me. I texted Jude, Richard's younger brother, the family's black sheep who'd traded real estate for geology fieldwork. Jude had always been my ally, sneaking me books when Richard mocked my useless history degree or wiring me cash when my car broke down. Richard just outed me as not a Callahan in front of the company. Says I'm cut from the trust. Help. His reply was instant. That bastard. Call me now. Jude's voice was gravelly, fresh off a Montana dig site. Marlie, what the hell happened? I spilled everything. The email, the public shaming Mom's evasiveness. My voice cracked when I got to the part about believing Richard was my savior. Jude listened, his silence heavy. Richard's a control freak, he said finally. He's scared you're getting a piece of the trust he wants for his boys. But this public stunt, that's not just about money. He's trying to break you. What's this proof he's got? No idea, I said, my throat tight. He says I'm not a Callahan by blood. Jude, do you know anything about my real father? A long pause. Not much, he said carefully. Celine mentioned a guy once before she married Richard. An artist, not the type to stick around. But Richard's not bluffing without something up his sleeve. You need to talk to your mom, Marlie, face to face. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. The mug caught my eye, its chipped rim a quiet defiance. I'd spent years trying to earn Richard's approval, thinking he'd saved us from ruin. Now I wondered if Mom had wanted to leave him only to be trapped by his promises, or something worse. I drove to her Boulder house, a glass and steel monstrosity that screamed Richard's taste. She opened the door, her cardigan loose, her eyes red-rimmed. Marlie, she said, stepping aside. I didn't know he'd go public like that. But you knew he was planning something, I said, stepping inside. You've been distant for weeks. What's going on? Who's my real father? She sank onto the couch, her hands twisting. His name was Daniel, she said softly. Daniel Ruiz. We were in love, but he had problems. Addiction, mostly. When I got pregnant, he left. Richard offered to adopt you to give us stability. But what I pressed, my heart pounding. I tried to leave him once, she whispered, tears spilling. When you were 3. I told him I couldn't stay, that I didn't love him. He showed me papers, legal documents saying he'd fight for custody if I left. Said he'd prove I was unfit because of Daniel's history. I stayed for you, Marlie. The room spun. Richard hadn't just saved us, he'd trapped us, using me as leverage. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice barely audible. I was ashamed, she said, and scared. I thought if you believed Richard was your hero, you'd be safe. Safe. The word stung sharp as the mug's chipped edge. I'd built my life on a lie, thinking Richard's coldness was my fault, not his cage. He's using Daniel now, I said, my anger rising. He's got proof I'm not his, and he's cutting us both out of the trust. Mom's face crumpled. I should have fought him, she said. I'm so sorry. I wanted to hug her, to scream, but I just stood there, the mug heavy in my bag. I'm going to that board meeting tomorrow, I said. I'm not letting him win. She grabbed my hand, her grip desperate. Be careful, Marlie. Richard's ruthless when he's threatened. I drove home, the Denver skyline a blur through my tears. In my apartment, I pulled the mug from my bag, tracing its sunflower petals. It wasn't just a mug, it was proof I'd existed in that family, even if Richard tried to erase me. Tomorrow, I'd face him not as the girl who'd begged for his approval, but as Marlie Hensley, ready to tear down his lies. But as I stared at the email, still open on my laptop, I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel Ruiz, my real father, was the key to unraveling everything. The Callahan boardroom was a glass cathedral of power, its windows framing Denver's skyline like a taunt. I walked in with my chipped ceramic mug in my bag, its sunflower a quiet rebellion against the memory of Richard Voss's email broadcast to the entire company yesterday. My cheeks still stung from the public shaming, the way co-workers whispered as I left the Callahan Foundation staff, now a family I'd never belonged to. But I wasn't here to shrink, I was here to demand the truth about Daniel Ruiz, my real father, and the lie Richard had built around my life. Richard sat at the head of the table, his suit sharp, his smile sharper. His sons Owen and Levi flanked him, Owen scribbling notes, his jaw tight. Levi scrolling his phone, his smirk a mirror of Richard's. Mom sat at the far end, her hands knotted, avoiding my gaze, her eyes shadowed by the guilt she'd confessed last night. Richard hadn't just adopted me. He'd trapped her with fake custody threats when she tried to leave him. Jude was on a video screen patched in from Montana, his flannel a middle finger to the room's polish. The bored cousins and suits I barely knew murmured, their eyes cutting through me like I was already erased. Marlie Richard said, his voice silk over steel. I admire your nerve showing up after yesterday's clarification. But the trust is for Callahan blood. You mean your empire, I said, setting my bag down the mug, clinking softly. You didn't need to humiliate me in front of the company to make that point. So what's the real play, Richard? A ripple of tension passed through the room. Owen's fingers froze on his pen, and Levi's smirk vanished, his eyes narrowing. Mom's head snapped up, her lips trembling, but she stayed silent. Richard leaned back, steepling his fingers. The play is fairness, he said. You're not my daughter, Marlie. I have evidence, and the board deserves transparency. Then let's see it. I challenged, my voice steady despite the ache of Mom's words echoing. He'd fight for custody, prove I was unfit. Show us this proof. Richard slid a folder across the table, his eyes cold. I opened it, my hands unsteady. Inside was a paternity test. Probability of paternity, 0%. No shock there, I'd known he wasn't my biological father. But the second document hit like a brick, a handwritten letter yellowed, signed by Daniel Ruiz. It read, I, Daniel Ruiz, acknowledge I'm the father of Marlie Hensley, born to Celine Hensley. I relinquish all claims. The ink looked too crisp, too new. I looked at Mom, my chest tight. Daniel Ruiz? I said, my voice low. You said he left because of addiction. Did he sign this? She flinched, her hands gripping the table. Marlie, I... Answer her? I cut in sharper than I meant to. The room went silent. Levi's phone forgotten the board's eyes on us. Richard spoke, his tone smug. Daniel was a drifter, Celine's lapse in judgment. He signed that when you were born, admitting you're his. You're not a Callahan, Marlie. I wanted to scream, but the mug in my bag grounded me. Its faded sunflower, a tether to the girl who'd been lied to for years. Mom had said Richard trapped her, used me to lock her in a marriage she didn't want. Now he was using Daniel to bury us both. You've known this forever, I said, turning to Mom. You let me think Richard saved us when he was holding you hostage with threats. Her tears fell, but I didn't soften. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered. I didn't know he'd use Daniel like this. I turned to Richard, my anger afire. Why now? The trust vote's today. What's so urgent you'd shame me in front of the company? He didn't flinch. We're reallocating funds for Owen's and Levi's projects. The trust is for true heirs, not strays. Owen shifted, his voice low. Dad, maybe we should... Quiet, Owen. Richard snapped, and Owen sank back, his eyes dark. Levi leaned forward, his voice cold. You've never been one of us, Marlie. You've never even tried. The words cut deep, but Jude's voice crackled through the screen. That's bullshit, Levi. Marlie's a Callahan by adoption, which Richard signed off on. You don't get to rewrite history because she's inconvenient. Richard's smile thinned. Adoption doesn't override blood, he said. Marlie's parentage disqualifies her. I'm filing to remove her by tomorrow. The glass walls closed in suffocating. Mom was sobbing quietly, the board whispering. I grabbed the folder, my knuckles white. This isn't done, I said, and walked out, my heart slamming. In my apartment, I spread the documents on my table, the mug beside them, my anchor. The paternity test was legit. Richard's money guaranteed that, but the Ruiz letter screamed fake. The ink was too clean, the paper too perfect. I wasn't a forger, but I'd restored enough old manuscripts to save Westgate Library to spot a lie. Was Daniel Ruiz even real, or a ghost Richard conjured? I called Jude, his voice now edged with rage. He's a snake, Marlie. That letter's too perfect, too convenient. Shows up right when the trust's at stake. Exactly. I agreed, tracing the mug's chipped rim. Jude, you knew Mom back then. Anything about Daniel Ruiz? He paused, careful. She mentioned him once. An artist, not a drifter. She loved him, but he broke her heart when he left. If that's Daniel, Richard might have tracked him or faked him. Faked him? I frowned, my mind racing. You think Richard forged this? He'd do anything to win. You're a threat, Marlie. You always have been. I hung up staring at the letter, my pulse racing. If Daniel was real, I needed him. If he was a lie, I needed proof. The board vote was tomorrow, and Richard was moving fast. I searched for Daniel Ruiz Denver online, but the results were noise, a plumber, a teacher, nothing fit. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Owen, meet me at the Colfax warehouse, 7 a.m. Alone. I heard Dad on a call. It's worse than you think. Owen, his loyal son. It smelled like a trap, but his text lacked Levi's arrogance, Richard's calculation. Why trust you? I replied. Because I'm done with his lies, he answered. I didn't sleep, my mind replaying Mom's confession. Richard's threats, her love for Daniel, my life as her cage's lock. The mug sat on my nightstand, its sunflower a challenge. I wasn't invisible no matter how hard Richard tried. By morning, I was at the warehouse, a crumbling Callahan property Richard hadn't yet razed. Owen weighted his hoodie up, eyes hollow. You showed, he said, his voice low. I didn't think you would. You said you know something? I replied, my hand on my bag, the mug's weight steady. Talk. He glanced around, nervous. Dad's not just after you. He's rewriting the trust to control everyone, Mom, me, Levi. I heard him threaten. Jude said he'd fake financials to cut him out. And that letter, it's just the start. He's got a plan to bury Mom for fraud. My blood ran cold. Fraud, show me. Owen pulled his phone, showing a grainy clip of Richard snarling at Jude, back off, or I'll make sure you're out too. And Levi's fixing the books to make it look clean. My heart sank. Richard wasn't just erasing me, he was breaking the family to save his empire, and Mom was just collateral damage. Owen's grainy recording of Richard's threats played on loop in my head as I stood in the Colfax warehouse's shadow, the chipped sunflower mug heavy in my bag. Richard wasn't just erasing me from the Callahan trust, he was rigging the game to control Mom, Jude, Owen, even Levi, with forged financials and lies about my father, Daniel Ruiz. The cold Denver morning bit my skin, but Owen's words burned hotter. Levi's fixing the books to make it look clean. My stepfather's empire was rotting, and I was the only one stubborn enough to dig up the truth. Why come to me? I asked Owen, my voice sharp, hand tight on my bag strap. You're his heir. You could have stayed quiet. Owen's hoodie hid half his face, but his eyes were raw, haunted. Because I'm done being his clone, he said, his voice low. Dad's controlled my whole life, my job, my future. Now he's threatening Mom, Jude, you. I heard him on that call, Marlie, and it's not just the trust. He's hiding something bigger, something that could tank the company. Bigger. How I pressed the mug's weight, grounding me against the fear creeping up my spine. Owen glanced at the warehouse's crumbling walls like he expected Richard to appear. He's been funneling trust money into a failing deal, some sketchy development project. He needs the trust to cover his losses, and he's willing to burn everyone to get it. That's why he's pushing you and Mom out. My stomach twisted. Richard's public shaming of me in front of the company wasn't just cruelty, it was a distraction, a way to clear the board for his real play. And the Daniel Ruiz letter, I asked. You think it's fake? Has to be, Owen said. It's too convenient. Dad's got Garrett Voss, his lawyer, cooking up whatever he needs. I don't know if Daniel's real, but that letter's a lie. I nodded, my mind racing. Mom's confession last night, Richard trapping her with fake custody threats. Her love for Daniel made the forged letter feel even dirtier. She'd stayed with Richard to protect me, thinking he was our savior while he'd been building a cage. Now he was using Daniel's name to lock us out. What's your plan? I asked Owen. He hesitated, then squared his shoulders. Dad's meeting Garrett tonight at the office after hours. They're finalizing papers for the board vote tomorrow. If we can get in find proof, maybe more forged documents, maybe financial records, we can stop him. I've got a key card. Sneak into the office. I raised an eyebrow, half expecting him to back out. That's bold for you. It's desperate, he admitted, a faint smile flickering. But you're the only one who's ever stood up to him, Marlie. I need you in this. His words hit hard, cracking the wall I'd built between us. Owen wasn't just Richard's heir, he was trapped like me, like Mom. Fine, I said. But if this blows up, you're not pinning it on me. Deal, he said. Tonight, 9 p.m. back entrance. Bring a recorder. We might catch him saying something we can use. I drove back to my apartment, adrenaline and doubt warring in my chest. Owen's rebellion felt real. But what if he was playing me, feeding Richard just enough to keep me in check? And Mom, her silence in the boardroom yesterday. Her tears last night. Why wasn't she fighting? I set the mug on my kitchen counter, its faded sunflower staring back like a dare. I'd painted it at 16, hoping to make Mom proud. But Richard's tacky had drowned out her quiet smile. Now it was my proof I existed, even if he tried to make me invisible. I opened my laptop, diving into Daniel Ruiz again. The name was a dead end online, too many hits, none matching Mom's artist love. But Jude's words from yesterday. An artist, not a drifter, nagged me. I searched Garrett Voss instead, and a buried ex-post from weeks ago caught my eye. Voss and Associates faked my cousin's estate docs. Paid a notary to forge signatures. Shady as hell. The thread was dead, but it screamed truth. If Garrett was forging for Richard, the Ruiz letter was just the start. I called Jude, his voice tense, from Montana. Marlie, you holding up that boardroom stunt was brutal. Barely, I said, filling him in on Owen's warehouse meeting and the recording of Richard's threats. Jude, I think Richard's forging everything. Daniel's letter, maybe more. Can you dig into Daniel Ruiz? Mom said he was an artist. He sighed heavy. I'll try. Celine only mentioned him once, said he painted like his soul was on fire. Broke her heart when he left. If he's real, Richard might have found him or buried him. But Marlie, you and Owen, sneaking into the office. That's dangerous. Richard's not just a bully, he's cornered. I know, I said, my hand brushing the mug. That's why I'm bringing a recorder. If Richard slips, I'll have him on tape. Be careful, Jude said softer. I'm flying to Denver tonight. Call if you need me. I hung up, my nerves electric. If we got caught, Richard wouldn't just cut me out, he'd ruin me. Maybe Owen too. I spent the day combing trust documents Mom had sent weeks ago, looking for cracks. The terms were ironclad, only legitimate heirs as verified by the board. My adoption should have counted, but Richard's proof was twisting it. And if he was faking financials like Owen said, the trust itself was at risk. That evening, I tucked a small digital recorder in my pocket, the mug back in my bag for luck. Jude texted he'd landed and was chasing leads on Daniel. Owen confirmed 9 p.m. back entrance. Security's thin. By 8:30, I was parked near the Callahan building, Denver's lights flickering like a warning. The mug's weight steadied me as I slipped out, hoodie up, and met Owen at the back door. He swiped his key card, the lock clicking. Service halls are clear, he whispered. Dad's office, 12th floor. We took the elevator. Owen's hands fidgeting, his face pale. You sure? I asked, my voice a hush. No, he said, meeting my eyes. But I trust you, Marlie. You don't break. His faith shook me, a reminder of the stakes. The elevator dinged, and we crept into the dark hallway, Richard's office glowing faintly behind its glass door. Owen swiped again, and we were in a shrine to Richard's ego, all mahogany and awards. I started my recorder, slipping it into my sleeve, and pulled out a flashlight. Look for financials, anything with Garrett's name, I said, scanning a locked cabinet. Owen pried it open with a letter opener revealing folders. I grabbed one marked Trust Revisions Drafts, giving Richard total control, Owen and Levi as puppets. Another had copies of the Ruiz letter, no originals. Then I found a memo from Garrett Ruiz, letter notarized. Celine's fraud claim ready for vote. Financial adjustments complete. Owen, I whispered, holding it up. They're faking it all. He nodded, his face grim, but froze as voices echoed outside Richard and Garrett. Hide, I hissed, shoving the memo in my bag with the mug. We ducked behind the desk, my recorder still running the mug's edge, biting my side. Richard's voice cut through the door as it opened. Levi's reports are done, he said low and sharp. The trust's losses are buried. Jude's sniffing around, though, deal with him. Garrett's laugh was cold. Already on it. A little pressure, he'll back off? The girl's the problem. She's not stopping. Then we crush her, Richard said. The Ruiz letter's enough to disqualify her and Celine. If she pushes, I'll leak it to the press. My blood ran cold, but my recorder caught every word. The mug pressed against me, a reminder of what I was fighting for. Not Richard's name, but Mom's freedom. My truth. The men left their footsteps fading, and Owen exhaled, shaking. We got him, he whispered. Not enough, I said, my voice trembling but fierce. We need Daniel. I pulled a folder from the cabinet expecting more memos, but found a photo, Mom young, laughing with a man in a paint-splattered jacket. On the back, her handwriting, Daniel, 1995. My heart stopped. Daniel Ruiz was real, and his ghost was about to haunt Richard's lies. The photo of Mom and Daniel Ruiz, her laughing him in a paint-splattered jacket, felt like a live wire in my hands as Owen and I slipped out of Richard's office, my recorder burning in my pocket. Richard's voice, caught on tape, echoed, "Crush her. Leak it to the press." The memo proving his forgery and Levi's faked financials was stuffed in my bag next to the chipped sunflower mug, its weight a reminder of the family I was fighting for, not Richard's empire, but Mom's freedom, my truth. The Denver night was sharp, the Callahan building's shadow looming as we took the service stairs, my heart still pounding from Richard and Garrett's voices in the office. Owen was silent, his face pale, the reality of his father's betrayal sinking in. You okay? I whispered, pausing on the landing, the mug clinking softly in my bag. No, he admitted, his voice rough. Dad's not just screwing you, Marlie. He's screwing us all. That memo, the financials, it's like he doesn't care who gets hurt. I knotted my throat tight. Owen wasn't Richard's shadow anymore. He was breaking free like me. We've got his voice on tape, I said. Threatening Jude, admitting Levi's cooking the books. But we need Daniel. If he's real, he's the key. What if he's not? Owen asked, his eyes searching mine. What if Dad made him up? Then this photo's a hell of a prop, I said, holding it up, Mom's handwriting. Daniel, 1995, staring back. But he's real. I feel it. We reached the back entrance, splitting up with a plan Owen would dig into the financials. I'd find Daniel before the board vote tomorrow. Back in my apartment, I spread the memo photo and forged Rui's letter on my table, the mug beside them like a sentinel. The photo was alive, Mom's joy, Daniel's kind eyes. I scanned it, running a reverse image search, praying for a lead. A 2019 blog post popped up, a Denver gallery exhibit featuring D. Ruiz, an artist with raw, haunting abstracts. No photo, no address, but a note: Ruiz works from a 5-point studio. My pulse raced. Daniel was close. I texted Jude, now in Denver, with the photo, found this in Richard's office. Daniel's an artist, 5 points. Help. His reply was instant. Damn, Marlie. I know that gallery. I'll call the owner. Stay put. No chance. I called Mom, my anger from the boardroom softened by her confession about Richard's custody threats. She answered, her voice fragile. Marlie, please tell me you're staying away from Richard. Too late, I said. I've got proof he forged the Ruiz letter. And a photo of you and Daniel, 1995. He's real, Mom. Where is he? A sob broke through. I didn't want you to know like this, she said. Daniel was my heart, but he was drowning in addiction. I thought he left because he couldn't handle a family. Richard said he'd protect us, but he lied, Marlie. He trapped me. Did Daniel know about me? I asked, my voice shaking, hand brushing the mug's chipped rim. No, she whispered. I found out I was pregnant after he left. Last I heard, he got clean, started painting again, but I don't know where. Richard must have dug him up to hurt us. Or invented him? I said, though the photo felt too real. I'm finding him, Mom. Richard's not winning. Be careful, she said, her voice breaking. He's desperate now. I hung up my resolve iron. By morning, Jude called with an address, a warehouse studio in 5 Points. Gallery owner says Daniel's a recluse, he said. Want me to come? No, I said, grabbing my bag, the mug inside. This is mine. The 5 Points warehouse district was a gritty maze, graffiti bleeding across rusted walls. Daniel's studio was behind a dented gate marked DR in faded paint. I knocked, heart hammering the mug's weight, my only anchor. The door opened, revealing a man in his 50s, gray-streaked hair, paint-stained hands, and eyes that mirrored mine. I knew instantly. Daniel Ruiz, I asked, my voice barely holding. He frowned, wiping his hands. Who's this? Marlie Hensley, I said, swallowing hard. I'm your daughter. His face froze, the rag slipping from his fingers. Marlie, he said, like tasting the name. Celine's kid. I nodded, stepping inside his chaotic studio canvases, stacked paint cans scattered the air sharp with turpentine. We sat on worn stools, and he stared at me, searching. I didn't know, he said, his voice rough. Celine never told me she was pregnant. I left because I was a mess, drugs debt. I thought I was saving her. Did you sign a letter? I asked, pulling the forged document from my bag, the mug clinking. Saying you're my father, giving up rights. He scanned it, his jaw tightening. That's not my signature, he said. I never signed anything. But... He paused, his eyes darkening. Richard Voss came to me years ago when I was in rehab. Offered me money to leave Denver for good. Said Celine didn't want me around. I was clean, trying to rebuild, so I took it. Moved to Taos, then came back last year. The twist hit like a punch. Richard hadn't just forged Daniel's name, he'd bribed him, exploiting his recovery to erase him from our lives. My anger flared, but so did my ache for Daniel, another victim of Richard's games. He's using you to cut me and Mom out of the Callahan trust, I said, showing him the memo. Says Mom committed fraud by hiding you. I've got him on tape admitting it's fake, but I need you to prove it. Daniel's hands shook, guilt and fury mixing in his eyes. Voss used me to hurt Celine, he said. And you. I'll help Marlie. I owe you that. You don't owe me, I said, softer than I meant. But I'd like you to be there tomorrow. The board votes at noon. He nodded, his voice thick. I'll bring something better than testimony, he said cryptically. I showed him the 1995 photo, his face softening. Celine sat for a painting that year, he said. It's still here. Might help. I left my mind spinning. Daniel wasn't just real, he was a weapon, his bribe a crack in Richard's armor. I met Jude at his hotel, the mug heavy in my bag as I filled him in. Daniel's in, I said, and Richard bribed him to vanish. We've got the recording, the memo, and Daniel's story. Jude's eyes blazed. I dug more, he said. Richard's failing project? It's a land deal tied to the Westgate Library site. He's planning to bulldoze it, use trust funds to cover his losses. That's why he needs control. My blood boiled. Westgate Library. My passion, a crumbling beacon of Denver's history, was Richard's next casualty. We end this tomorrow, I said, gripping my bag, the mug's edge sharp. I'm sending the recording to the board's oversight committee tonight. Let them hear Richard's voice. Jude nodded fierce. You, me, Owen Daniel will hit the boardroom like a storm, but Marlie Richards cornered. He'll lash out. Let him, I said, the mug. My anchor. Daniel's paint. Mom's cage, my recording. They were my family, not Richard's name. Tomorrow, I'd break his lies, and maybe the mug, to build something true. The Callahan boardroom was a glass arena, Denver's skyline, a silent witness, as I walked in the chipped sunflower mug in my bag like a heartbeat. Richard Voss sat at the head, his suit, a mask, his smile a blade honed by yesterday's threats caught on my recorder. Crush her. Levi's fixing the books. Mom was there, her hands steady, now eyes fierce with a fire I hadn't seen since she confessed Richard's custody trap. Owen sat beside her, his nod a quiet vow, while Levi stared at his phone, his confidence cracked. Jude stood by the door, flannel defiant, and behind him Daniel Ruiz, his paint-stained jacket a testament clutching a wrapped canvas. The bored cousin Suits and Clara, a sharp-eyed aunt, watched the air thick with the weight of the trust vote. I'd sent my recording to the board's oversight committee last night, Richard's voice damning him threats to Jude Levi's faked financials plans to bury Mom and me. The memo proving the forged Daniel Ruiz letter was in my bag next to the mug, its sunflower fading, but fierce. This wasn't about Richard's empire, it was about Mom's freedom, Daniel's truth, and the Westgate Library, my passion, which Richard planned to bulldoze to save his failing deal. Today, I'd break his lies, and maybe the mug to build something real. Richard spoke first, his voice smooth. Marlie's presence is unnecessary. Her parentage, Daniel Ruiz's letter, disqualifies her from the trust. Celine's fraud in hiding it voids her claim too. Mom stood, her voice cutting like glass. Fraud? You trapped me. Richard, with fake custody threats when I tried to leave. You used Marlie to chain me, and now you're lying to steal from us all. The board gasped, Clara's eyes narrowing. I stepped forward, pulling the memo from my bag, the mug clinking. This proves Richard forged the Ruiz letter, I said, sliding it across the table. He paid a notary to fake it, just like he's faking Mom's fraud to control the trust. Levi's phone hit the table, his face pale. Owen spoke, voice low but firm. I heard Dad order Levi to falsify financials, he said. He's hiding losses from a failing land deal, siphoning trust funds to cover it. Clara banged the table. Is this true, Richard, she demanded. Richard's smile twisted, his voice rising. Lies, Marlie's manipulating you, her, and her drifter father. Enough, Daniel said, stepping forward, his voice steady. I'm Daniel Ruiz. I never signed any letter. Richard bribed me to leave Denver when I was in rehab, said Celine didn't want me around. I didn't know about Marlie until yesterday. He unwrapped the canvas, revealing a painting, Mom young, radiant, her eyes alive with love. Celine sat for this in 1995. She's your legacy, not Richard's schemes. The board fell silent. The painting, a living proof of Mom's place in this family and mine. My chest ached, not just for her, but for Daniel, robbed of us by Richard's cruelty. I pulled out my recorder, playing it loud. Richard's voice cold and clear, threatening Jude, admitting Levi's fraud, vowing to crush me. The board erupted, cousins shouting, Clara's face thunderous. But the mug, my anchor, slipped from my bag as I moved, hitting the floor. It shattered, sunflower shards scattering. My heart lurched, but I didn't flinch. That mug had been my proof I belonged, but it was just a thing fragile like Richard's lies. I didn't need it anymore. Clara stood, her voice iron. I moved to suspend Richard's authority pending an audit and reinstate Marlie and Celine as beneficiaries. Richard lunged for the memo, but Jude blocked him fierce. Sit down, he growled. The vote passed, hands rising, Richard's face ashen as his empire crumbled. He stormed out, vowing lawsuits, but the oversight committee's email hit my phone. Investigation launched, based on recording. His threats were empty now. The board adjourned, and I knelt, gathering the mug's shards, their edges sharp but beautiful. Mom hugged me, her tears warm. I should have fought sooner, she whispered. You fought today, I said, hugging back. That's enough. Owen approached, eyes heavy. I didn't know how deep it went, he said. I'm sorry, Marlie. You chose us, I said. That's what matters. Levi hung back, silent. His loyalty to Richard shattered, but his path unclear. Jude grinned, clapping my shoulder. You're a damn hurricane, kid. Daniel stood apart, holding the painting, uncertain. I walked over the shards in my hand. Thank you, I said. For the painting, for showing up. I missed everything he said, voice thick. But I'm here now if you'll have me. I'd like to try, I said, my throat tight. In the boardroom alone, I stood before the table, the shards in my pocket. I spoke, my voice steady. I used to think this mug was all I had of my childhood, I said, pulling out a shard, its sunflower glinting. I thought I had to protect it to prove I belonged. But it broke like Richard's illusions. And I realized it's not about keeping what breaks. It's about remaking it into something worth keeping. I set the shard down. I don't want a bigger share of the trust. I'll take what Mom asked for me, nothing more. And I'll use it to buy and restore Westgate Library, the one Richard wanted to bulldoze for another Callahan Tower. That library holds stories, truth, memory, the things this family forgot. I don't need your name to honor my legacy. I'm my mother's daughter, and I'll build from that. The board nodded, Clara's eyes warm. I walked out the shards, my new strength. That night in my apartment, I glued the mug's pieces into a small statue, a sunflower rising from broken edges set on my desk under a lamp. The trust was safe. Mom and I reinstated Richard facing charges for fraud. But my victory wasn't the money. It was Mom's fire. Owen's choice, Jude's loyalty, Daniel's painting, and the library I'd save. They were my family, not Richard's name, each a shard in my new statue. Imperfect, but mine. I traced the statue's petals, its cracks glowing. It wasn't the mug I'd clung to, it was better remade from pain into proof I didn't need Richard's acceptance. I'd built a space where truth thrived, and that was my legacy.